I don't fuck with the Chad Gable story in WWE right now. I think it's well told for what I think they're going for, but it runs into two problems. One logistical and one theological. Let's talk about it. One of the major reasons that I believe Triple H's WWE is succeeding is that there is such an intense dedication to making sure that face wrestlers work. For a decade in WWE, face wrestlers underneath the main event were shoved into the mud by both company and audience because they were handcuffed creatively while heels were not. Alexa Bliss is allowed to tear Bayley down verbally, say all manner of things, and if Bayley attacks her, or confronts her, or does anything except keep a happy face, then she's a bad guy. But then also, Bayley loses that match because why not? Flash forward to today, and babyfaces are booked like fighting isn't an inherent negative. Becky Lynch is doing Looney Tunes punches to Liv Morgan for talking trash. Cody Rhodes is a tad arrogant and cocky. Sami Zayn gets attacked by Chad Gable, and the next week he gets his lick back. To me, this is the ideal way you book faces. They are the stars of the show, and the heels are the obstacle in the way of the face, and thus the audience, achieving the happiness that comes with victory. To me, this is how stories are traditionally told, with the good guy winning in the end. But I know that wrestling isn't that cut and dry. Not because it's a more advanced version of storytelling, but just because sometimes it makes more sense for the bad guy to win. However, with that being the case, there are an infinite amount of tools and approaches that makes this justifiable, and that's fine. Theoretically, I understand that, but still, it rubs me the wrong way when heels beat faces. Maybe I'm dumb, maybe it's an idea rooted more in theory than in practice, but I think that there are just far fewer avenues for stories with heels unless you handicap face wrestlers to the point where they're just one-note nothings. Throughout wrestling history, it's typically perceived that heels run the business, that heat supersedes everything, and that the formula for success with heels versus faces as champions and top draws is that heels get long runs while faces get short runs. The idea being that you, the audience, want the heel to lose for so long that it makes the person who beats them. But there is an understanding that faces are just less interesting than heels, so you cycle them out before they get stale. All sorts of ways to go with that. That's a far bigger subject that I'm interested in broaching right now. That said, I think that heels winning leaves a bad taste in my mouth because I just think that overt bad guys are less interesting and create far more logistical holes than they fix. I don't really like Chad Gable, but really, I think I just don't like the culture around him. It's fine. You don't like everybody, whatever. Gable's story in WWE at the time of writing is one of the best on Raw, but I don't really vibe with it on any level except week-to-week isolated segments because of two reasons. The first is logistical. I think that Gable's story, at least in the short term, is about his arrogance and delusion getting in the way of his success. So he takes it out on people who are too naive and too broken to push back until they get pushed to that point. If that's the case, him being around Sami Zayn and fighting for the Intercontinental Championship is far more incidental. After all, it's this title and the Sami loss that got him to snap. But the story continuing around the Intercontinental Championship seems like it's splitting the focus to me. The way that the story ends, if I'm writing it, is that Otis walks out on Gable during an IC title match, and Gable loses, then is completely done with it and goes on to feud with Otis. And honestly, I don't know if they do that because having Gable lose title matches, turning him heel, and then him losing again feels very bizarre. Now, watching the show, they have been laying the groundwork for the Creed brothers and Ivy Nile to join with Gable and replace Alpha Academy. And on a wrestling level, this is good booking. I don't know how good it is to get 3 wrestlers in a faction that are better than Gable rather than the 2 that are already there, but hey, you take what you can get. If that's what the WWE is planning, then my Gable story could still work in a way. Otis and friends leave Gable, Gable loses to Sami, and Gable recruits the Creeds and Ivy Nile as his new unit, and then he wins the IC title. That way, you have Gable lose his crew and also lose the match, but he gets a new crew without making the old ones losers, giving a facelift to all acts involved. The only problem is that, logistically, this doesn't gel with me either. Gable might honestly be too good at being a psycho coach because why on earth would anybody join up with Chad Gable right now? Maybe you could tell a story about how the Creed saw that Gable is tough on the Alpha Academy because they're weak, and they're based red-pilled Chads who wouldn't get treated that way. But this is copium. The solution to the question of why would anybody side with Chad Gable is to prove that Gable is a winner by giving him the IC title. But if you do that before giving him the new unit, it makes that unit kind of unnecessary. These logistical concerns run in parallel with my theological concern. That being that any Chad Gable success enforces that he is correct in what he's doing. I understand that wrestling is not a haven for positivity and that sometimes bad guys win. But running a story where someone is manipulative and abusive towards people, blaming everybody else for his failures, gets increasingly deranged, and then he wins doesn't sit right with my spirit. There is a world where you can pitch me on Chad Gable wins the title and loses it to Otis. But still, I don't think that story being over a title is necessary. In fact, I'd argue that it's more compelling without a title attached to it because it would leave Gable penniless and alone, which is what this character deserves. To me, there is no world where you should write this story and have Chad Gable win any part of it. He shouldn't win the IC title with help from Alpha Academy. He shouldn't lose and replace the Alpha Academy with the Creeds. He shouldn't win the IC title even if the promise is that Otis will break out and beat Gable for it, because literally any victory that Gable gets just communicates that what he's doing is justifiable. He should just be a little less abusive. And I don't know, maybe I'm just pussy, but I think that writing stories that reward these kinds of characters, even temporarily, leaves me feeling kind of gross. People get weird about heels losing in wrestling, saying they have to win sometimes or else they aren't threats. And theoretically, I get that, but I think that these people miss the forest for the trees sometimes. I think it might just be the way that I view wrestling, believing that rosters should have like 5 undeniable good guys, 5 undeniable bad guys, and like 30 people who skew good but can still be on the renegade side of the equation should it come to that. You can argue that this makes for less interesting characters, but I think that ideological clashes are always going to be more interesting than this guy is good, this guy beats his wife, they're fighting over a wrestling championship. I don't know. Maybe I'm just getting old.